Okay, Shubham is asking one question: why verifier seems to be more powerful than deciders, right? So, see, the example is, for example, solving a problem, right? That seems much harder than actually just checking if the solution, if given a solution, just verifying the solution. For example, finding a Hamiltonian path looks harder than given a Hamiltonian path and verifying whether it's a Hamiltonian path. So far we don't know whether there can exist a polynomial time algorithm to find a Hamiltonian path. But it's a very simple algorithm for verifying if someone claims that there is an Hamiltonian path. So verifying the solution, right? It's very easy. So
Am I audible?
I think that, yeah.
So you were just saying that the verifying a solution is easy. So then why is the verifier so powerful then?
No, it's easy. That's why you can verify even the difficult problems. See, what do you mean by powerful? We said that NPDA is more powerful than DPDA, right? That means NPDA was able to really solve more languages than DPDA. So here it looks that certainly what you can solve in polynomial time, you can verify that easily in polynomial time because you can solve and verify. But problems which are not known yet, that whether they exist in polynomial class or not, P class or not, still you can verify for them for sure in polynomial amount of time. So it seems that verification is more powerful than solving a problem.
So then why do you say that if you can verify a problem in polynomial time on a deterministic Turing machine, you can solve the same problem in polynomial time on a non-deterministic Turing machine?
Can you repeat
So
your question?
then why do you say then why do you say that verifying the solution of a problem in polynomial time on a deterministic Turing machine is equivalent to solving the same problem on a non-deterministic no, solving the same problem on a non-deterministic Turing machine in polynomial time?
Oh, you are saying the equivalence between the verifier and the NDTM, right? That
Yes,
verifier
yes.
verifying in polynomial amount of time and a non-deterministic machine solving it in polynomial amount of time. How this equivalence holds? See, non-deterministic machine solving it in polynomial amount of time. How much time is it going to take on a deterministic machine? If you were to
Exponential,
convert that
exponential,
non-deterministic machine into a deterministic machine, exponential.
exponential. Yeah, it will be 2 to the power n.
Yeah, 2 to the power whatever the polynomial you are using,
Yes.
right? So that's what happens when you try to solve the problem using the deterministic and try to convert that non-deterministic machine into deterministic. It looks like it takes amount of time, which is very similar to the brute force searching,
Yes.
right? So but still searching that on a deterministic machine cannot be better. Maybe we don't know, there might be some efficient algorithm, but at this point of time we don't know any such efficient algorithm. But verification doing in polynomial amount of time is still possible. I think I forward a video to all of you, right?
Yes.
I'm not sure how many of you have watched, but there is a very excellent example given. Sudoku, solving a Sudoku puzzle, right? It looks difficult, but given the solution it becomes very easy to verify, right?
Yes.
If there is even 1000 cross 1000 size or whatever size Sudoku is given, and if someone comes with the entries that see this is the filling that you will get as a solution to the Sudoku, verifying will be what? You have to just run actually what? In the every boxes and every diagonal, every row, every column wise, you have to do the verification that the sum is equals to whatever the number you are getting. That's all, right?
Yes.
Verification is very easy. But if someone asks you to solve it, for solving, you have to actually, while placing every number, you have to keep in mind that if I place it here, other fill-ups that is there, they will get affected by this.
Yes.
So verification
Right.
is more powerful because it can, even the difficult problems, you can verify the solution very easily. But when it comes to solve the problems in polynomial amount of time, it looks that we cannot solve many problems.
So,
Is
so
it
is,
clear?
is so is there any like mathematical proof behind this?
Mathematical proof for what?
This equivalence?
What equivalence?
Yes, the exponential time is the sums that can be solved on a non-deterministic Turing machine in polynomial time can be verified on a deterministic Turing machine in polynomial time. Like there's a mathematical proof or something for this.
Can you repeat your question?
So like I mentioned that there was an equivalence with the verification part on a deterministic Turing machine with the um, problem solved with the finding of a solution on a non-deterministic Turing machine. So is there
The
any proof?
equivalence.
Yes, yes, the equivalence. So is there any proof for this equivalence?
We discussed, see, this thing that we discussed, something called proof by construction, right?
Yes,
This is the proof, and this is a valid mathematical proof. Given the machine, given a verifier, you are proving that I can develop a non-deterministic Turing machine. And given a non-deterministic Turing machine n, given a machine means what? All the transitions, all the transition table and everything. So given
yes,
n, you can develop a verifier.
yes,
So proof by construction, you are proving that both of these, if one exists, you can develop the other one, or the other exists, you can develop the other one, and that's what establishes the equivalence.
yes, sir, understood. Thank you, sir.
Dhruv, can you just unmute yourself and ask the question, because it becomes very difficult to understand at this point what you are really meant to ask.
Sir, am I audible?
Yeah.
What the definition of NP, like we defined NP was that we can write a polynomial time verifier for that problem. So if
Yeah.
we can write such a verifier, then it's in the NP class. So
Correct.
what I am asking is, suppose given a mathematical problem, any mathematical problem, if if the proof is if a proof is given to us, uh, and that proof is in polynomial, like we want to verify if that proof is correct or not, then if it can be done in polynomial amount of time, then it will be an NP problem. So what I was asking is proving a mathematical problem an NP problem?
Okay, that's a very interesting and very beyond the point question. But see, altogether, proving a problem, again, whatever the theorem, suppose there is a set of all the theorems in the universe, right? And the theorems are written in the form of a string. And for holding the theorem means there is an oracle who knows all the theorems that can exist in mathematics. We can assume, right? As soon as we are developing, researching the theorems, we are placing, okay, hence proved, and hence proved. Suppose there is a class of such all theorems exist. Now, to say whether the theorem is provable or not, right, you have to find the proof. But you are saying given a proof, validating if the proof, and proof is what? Proof is again a step by step what you have to verify that the assumptions are correct is step by step what the logics you have used. Either it is a next derivation step from the previous step, or you have used some already given logic which belongs to that. So if everything that you are using can be done in polynomial amount of time, you can say that the verifier is there.
All right, sir.
Okay, I think means if many of you have not watched that video, please go back and watch. That is a very interesting explanation of P versus NP, and it also talks about several other technical facts in a sugar coating. So you will understand that because it talks in a language that is more understandable. We talk very theoretically in terms of Turing machines, in terms of that, but when you go to the real world, that video is about that how in the real world there are so many different problems that are actually connected to what we are studying here. Okay, so moving further, if you try to see, uh, we said that okay, that equivalence exists. So basically, if you try to see the P class and NP class, what is P class? P class is actually collection of all the languages for which membership can be decided quickly, right? So it is by decided in polynomial time. And NP is a collection of the languages for which the membership problem you are able to decide, correct? So whatever the membership problem, set membership problem we started with, for the problems which are in P, you are able to decide the membership problem. Basically, you can solve the membership problem in polynomial amount of time. So every such problem in P is of that kind. But in NP, the membership problem is not decided, it is verified. So if there is a claim for a language to be in NP, so you need to understand and verifying that claim can be done in polynomial amount of time. So the membership can be verified in polynomial amount of time. We are not writing the deterministic Turing machine because we are assuming that we are just talking with the same kind of model, deterministic model. So the deterministic model can decide in polynomial amount of time for the problems which are in P, and it can verify the problems which are in NP. So it's in NP for sure because verification is easy. Now, every problem that is in P is by default in NP. Why? Because you can solve, you can decide the membership in polynomial amount of time. So when it comes to verify, you can even decide and then verify. Still, it will take only polynomial amount of time. So that is why every problem which is in P is also in NP. Right? So this is very much clear. So the bubble that you look like is something like this. Now the question is, there are some problems which we don't know whether it belongs here or it is still in the class P. So the question is whether this hierarchy is true or it's P equals to NP. Because for example, ham path, does it a problem here or it's a simple problem here? We don't know. We are unable to decide whether this ham path and several such problems that we have you will see whether it belongs here in this situation or in this situation. So this question of P equals to NP, actually it's a $1 million question, I think decided in 2000 sometime by there is some university. So you're gonna win $1 million if you prove either P is equals to NP or you prove that P is not equals to NP. Any of this, if you prove, you're gonna win $1 million. Now, it was very difficult to do so, but see, again, what people in this question was very popular and famous, but in 1970s somewhere, there were two guys, Stephen Cook and Leonid Levin. So Cook and Levin, they actually came up with a class of problems in NP which were the hardest problem. So they used to claim that this problem is as hard as any problem in the class NP. And they named those problems as NP complete. So they said that, okay, in this class NP, there is a set of problems which is called NP complete, and solving these problems, right, it is like that these problems are as hard as solving any other problem in NP. So these were the hardest problem. So if you are able to solve any NP problem, you will be able to solve. If you are able to solve any problem here, that means all other problems in the class can be solved very easily. If this problem can be solved very easily. And that's what helped the theoretician to develop a very specific fact, that if you can solve one NP complete problem, you can solve all the problems or NP in somewhere the same polynomial amount of time of the time that you are taking to solve that problem. So if this problem can be solved in polynomial amount of time, every other problem can be solved in polynomial amount of time. It is that kind of relationship that they established. And second point that helps from that problem is that if there is any NP complete problem that you ensure that it takes X amount of time, definitely these NP complete problems are going to take at least that much amount of time. So it will be beyond that. It cannot be done better than these. That is for sure. Because these problems are as hard as any of the NP problem. So from the theoretical perspective, NP complete problem became very interesting, because if there is any NP complete problem and you solve it in polynomial amount of time, the whole hierarchy collapses. And we'll understand it very soon with the mathematical understanding of reducibility and some kind of theorems that we have already seen. But if you prove, if there exists any problem A which belongs to NP complete, right, and A is in P, if you are able to show that, it will mean that P is equals to NP, because you will be able to solve all NP problems in polynomial amount of time, and that's what we're going to prove. At least we will sketch the proof. But at the same time, if someone comes with the claim that there is a NP problem, there exists an NP problem that takes more than polynomial amount of time, that will ensure that all these NP complete problems will also take at least more than polynomial amount of time. So any existence of at least one problem in NP that takes more than polynomial amount of time, that will be sufficient to prove that P is not equals to NP, because that will give a proof of a whole bunch of problems that cannot be solved in polynomial amount of time. So that is a theoretical importance of this NP class, NP complete class. But from the practical point of view, as soon you prove that a problem A is actually in NP complete, I think you should stop trying to solve this in polynomial amount of time. Many people have really spent a lot of time to prove that P is equals to NP, and they realize, okay, I think it might not be really possible. So most of the people believe that the correct answer is P is not equals to NP. So if it remains like that, certainly you might not be able to solve the problem A in polynomial amount of time. So you should not break your head writing a code that can run efficiently to solve that problem. Okay, are we good up to this point? Any questions?
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
So we conclusively cannot say whether P is equal to NP or P is not equal to NP. So we can't conclusively say any of the two.
Yeah. If you can claim and prove, you will win $1 million. Okay, so let's enter in the realm of NP complete problems. Okay, so before starting, so the first problem, just like we proved that halting problem, right? Actually, ATM was undecidable. That was the first problem. And for that, we used a very different logic. So here, we're going to prove the first problem to be NP complete is SAT. What is a SAT? SAT is actually is a encoding of a phi here is not empty set. Phi is meaning a Boolean formula. So here phi is a Boolean encode, a string encoding of a Boolean formula such that phi is a satisfiable Boolean formula. Now, what is a Boolean formula? So I hope you all know what is a Boolean variable. If there is a variable x and it can take only value 0 or 1, so we say it's a Boolean or true or false, any of that, right? So it is called a Boolean variable. Now there are some Boolean operations, right? This is denoting and, this is denoting or, and there is another notation that denotes this as not, right? So if you are using and, so it will be x and y, two Boolean variables. It will be x or y, and the negation, there are two ways to prove, write either this or even writing x bar also means the same, that not x. So I think you already know, you might have studied this in discrete maths. So a Boolean formula is that using the Boolean operations, you are actually having literals and expression. So it's a Boolean expression. A Boolean formula is a Boolean expression. So you have variables and operators, operations connected and written in expression way. So maybe there can be a formula, for example, phi is equals to x bar and y and x bar and z bar. Now, how many variables have you used? We have used x, y, z. Now, for each of the variables, what all possible options can be there? So if you try to see the overall, there can be 2 to the power, the number of literals there are. These are called literals. So the number of variables that can be used, those many possible solutions can be there, right? So x can take 0, y and z all can take 0 or 0, 1, 1, 0, 0, 1, then 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, 0, 0, 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 0, and 1, 1, 1. All 8 possibilities. Now, these are the all possible cases that these variables can take value. And for each of them, the formula may become satisfiable or not. Satisfiable means the value of phi becomes 1. Means true. So if you try to see for, let's say 0, 0, 0. So this takes value 0 and 0 negation becomes 1. So it takes value 1. This takes y, so 0. So 1 and 0 and it becomes 0. But that's okay. There is a or. Here it takes 1, but z again is 0. So it takes value 1 and it takes value 1. So it is a satisfiable. Because it becomes overall 1 and 0, it becomes 1, or 1 and 1, 1. So overall you get 1. The value of phi is 1. So 0, 0, 0 is a assignment for variables x, y, z such that you satisfy the formula. So that's what is a satisfying the formula means. When you evaluate the formula based on some assignment of the variables, you get the value 1. Now, SAT, if you see, it's a formal language again. It's a set of strings. The strings represent a Boolean formula, and it contains only those Boolean formulas for which there is a satisfying assignment. There might be some Boolean formulas for which there cannot exist any satisfying assignment. So SAT contains all those Boolean formulas. Now, there is a theorem that proves that SAT is NP complete. But before that, do you think SAT is NP? This problem SAT, is it in NP or not? Anyone? What is the answer to the question for is it yes or no? If it is yes, tell me the certificate that you can use to verify. If it is no, then you have to give me arguments why you think so. So what do you think? SAT is in NP or not? Very good. Yes, SAT is in NP. And if the certificate will be some assignment, right? Some assignment for all the variables. In this case, it was XYZ. Otherwise, what all variables are given in a Boolean formula, whatever the variables, for every variable, you fix an assignment. That will work as a certificate. Because if someone comes with a claim that you have given a formula phi1 and someone comes with a claim that this is satisfiable, what does this mean? This means there exists assignment for every variable, right? For every variable in phi, that when you do the evaluation, it will give you the value 1. Now, given the assignments, verifying and evaluating the experiment is very easy. But checking if there exists such an assignment is a difficult problem. So if someone comes with a claim of a certificate in the form of some assignment, that, see, if you take this assignment, it will give you that the formula is satisfiable. Verifying that is very easy. And that's why the problem is in NP. Because you can place the values, place the variables in the form of 0 and 1, and then it is a Boolean expression that you have to evaluate. And that will not take more than polynomial amount of time. But finding such an assignment or checking if such assignment cannot exist, that's a very difficult question. At least it looks like. So for sure SAT is in NP, but we have to look at some other properties to prove that SAT is in NP complete. But before going there, we will try to understand a variant of mapping reducibility which is called polynomial time reducibility.
Sir, what is the difference between NP and NP complete?
Oh, we'll come to that. Don't worry. But if you want to know very quickly, let me tell. The definition of NP complete. First, the problem has to be in NP. Second, it has to be something called NP hard. What is NP hard? We will define very soon, right? So a problem which is NP complete, it has to be definitely NP. So SAT is already NP. So it satisfies the first condition. Now, how it is NP hard, we're going to prove very soon. And to prove that, we have to first understand the polynomial time reducibility. Okay. So what do we mean by polynomial time reducibility? It is something very similar to what we had mapping reducibility. But if you go back and try to remember what was mapping reducibility, It used to say that there exists a computable function that, right, there exists a computable function, but we did not mention how much time does it take to compute that function. Computable function was what? There exists a Turing machine that halts in finite amount of time. We said finite amount of time. We did not mention polynomial. So here we're gonna say that first of all, something called polynomial time computation. So what is a polynomial time computable function? A function that can be, so there exists a polynomial time Turing machine M. So it is a polynomial time deterministic machine M which halts. So if you start with W as an input, you will halt with FW. So in polynomial amount of time, it halts and it converts the input W into FW. And it certainly halts in polynomial amount of time. So that is something very important. When we were talking about mapping reducibility, we did not care about the time in terms of polynomial. We said it has to be finite only. But here we are saying it not just have to be finite, it has to be a polynomial amount of time, that too on a deterministic Turing machine. So this M has to be a deterministic Turing machine. Because if it is a non-deterministic Turing machine polynomial amount of time, it will become what? Exponential on the deterministic Turing machine. So until any number of tapes or any other variants that are polynomially equivalent to a single tape deterministic Turing machine, you can take all such machines. It doesn't matter. But it has to be polynomial time equivalent. Right? So we are taking such machine and we claim that it halts and it converts the input W into FW in polynomial amount of time. Okay, so what is polynomial time reducibility? So we say that a language A is polynomial time reducible. So at place of M, we write P here. Right? In mapping reducibility, we used to write mapping reducible to B. Here we are writing that a language A is polynomial time reducible to a language B if there exists a polynomial time computable function F, right, such that for every W part of sigma star, whenever W is part of A, this will happen if and only if FW is part of B. If W belongs to A, if only W belongs to A, if and only if FW belongs to B. So this situation is same as we had for the mapping reducibility. The only difference here we have is this polynomial time. Right. So you say that this is a polynomial time reduction from A to B. Is it clear? Or is there any doubt? So basically the function that actually converts the input of which you are checking in A to an input format for B, that function should be able to convert this W into FW in polynomial amount of time. That's all we are claiming. So the conversion from instance of problem A to instance of problem B, set membership, it should be, the conversion should happen in polynomial amount of time. So that has to be ensured. Previously we were ensuring that this conversion is done in finite amount of time. Now we are saying, trying to ask that it has to be done in polynomial amount of time. Okay. Now, very similar to what we have seen already, the theorems there, it says that if A is polynomial time reducible to B and B is in P, then what? A also belongs to P. That's a very trivial theorem. Proving this is very easy, and I will not go and prove, but it is very similar to what we were saying there, that if A is mapping reducible to B and B is decidable, so A is also decidable. So whenever we write that A is polynomial time reducible to B, it means that B is what? B is what? As hard as A. So because there is a polynomial time reduction, so if you are able to solve B in polynomial amount of time, you will be able to solve A also in polynomial amount of time. By doing what? You can convert the instance of A to instance of B in polynomial amount of time and then use the solution for B to answer for A. Is it clear? Or is there any doubt? Okay, so let's try to first prove of one polynomial time reduction, that a problem 3 sat is polynomial time reducible to our clique problem. So what is a 3 sat problem? So before talking about 3 sat problem, let us understand what is a 3CNF formula. So 3CNF is also a Boolean formula which has some constraints on the Boolean formula. So first of all, I think you already know what is a literal in a Boolean formula. So literal can be of two types, a variable in its own form or in negation form. So there are two types of literals. A clause is said to that the literals are connected only with the OR operations, right? So when you say there is a clause in a Boolean formula, it is like there is x1 connected with x2 connected with x3 bar, something like that, and further connected with x4 bar. So this is a clause. Now there is something called a Boolean formula given in conjunctive normal form. So it's a standard form of writing Boolean formula. What it ensures that, and it is also known as CNF formula. So a Boolean formula given in conjunctive normal form is that you have clauses. So there is a clause 1, it is connected with clause 2 with AND operation, with clause 3, and likewise up to K clauses. And each of the clause contains literal connected with themselves within the clause with OR operator. So you have AND outside the clauses and you have OR operations within the clauses. So this is a conjunctive normal form of writing a Boolean formula. Now, if you say that the number of literals in the every clause is exactly 3, it becomes a 3CNF formula. 3CNF means it's a conjunctive normal form Boolean formula with 3 clauses you are limiting. Is it clear what is a 3CNF formula? So for example, you will have maybe x1 or with x2 bar or with x3, and this whole thing is AND with x2 or with x3 bar or with x5, this whole thing AND with x1 or 4 or x6. So this formula that is given, it is in CNF first of all, because you have clauses connected with AND operation, and within the clauses you have OR operation, and every clause has exactly 3 literals, maybe in its original or negation form. So anyone has any doubt with this 3CNF formula. So now we're gonna prove that there are two problems. The first one is a 3-SAT problem, and this 3-SAT problem is that there is a formula phi, and this phi is a satisfiable 3CNF formula. And the second problem is click. What was the problem click? It was to check whether there exists. So here it is about a graph and a value k such that G is an undirected graph with a k click. So these two problems we have to prove that 3-SAT is polynomial time reducible to click. What do we need to prove? First try to understand. To prove this, you have to give a function f. There exists a function f that can convert some instance of 3-SAT. What will be instance of 3-SAT? So it can take a formula phi, right? It can take a formula phi encoding and it can convert it into a graph and a value k. So you should have such a formula, such a function that can convert a string encoding of a 3CNF formula into a graph and a value k. This construction, you should have such a function that can convert this such that what holds that whenever the formula is part of 3-SAT, this condition is met if and only if the graph that you have generated and the value k, that instance is in click. So this mapping from this to this, whatever the function you're going to use, it has to satisfy this. Means whenever the formula is in 3-SAT, the corresponding graph and value k that you are generating using function, it has to be in click. Means there should have a click of size k in the graph G. And whenever there is a click of size k in the graph G, the corresponding phi should be satisfiable. That's what we have to prove. Are you guys clear what we are trying to prove? Because it will be of no help until you understand what we are trying to do. So to prove this, that's what we have to establish. So first of all, we have to find a function of that kind, and we have to establish that the function that converts still holds for these if and only if proposition. Okay, let's try doing the conversion. So I'm going to define how the function f converts a Boolean formula phi, which is in 3CNF form, into a graph and value k. Right? So the construction is something very simple, and I'm going to give it with the help of example. So let's take example as phi equals to a1, b1, c1 and a2. Oh, sorry, not this. So this example is given in the book, so I'm using it so that if you don't understand, you can go back reading the book. So x1 with x1 with x2. Now you might be thinking that why there are two literals of the same value. So it is just made sure that the literal is of size, the clause is of size 3. So it is actually representing just x1 and x2 clause. But to make sure that it is in 3CNF, we have again added x1 to it, just to bring it to the size 3. So x1 with x1 with x2, right? This is the first clause, and with x1 bar or x2 bar or x2 bar, and then with x1 bar, x2, x2. Good. So how many clauses are there? This is my clause 1, this is my clause 2, this is my clause 3. And this is the first literal, second literal, third literal in my first clause. This is first literal, second literal in my second clause, and likewise. Now, there can be k such clauses. I have taken example which has 3 clauses in the CNF form. So what we do, we construct a graph from this file. So constructing a graph will require what? Constructing a graph will require, first of all, you have to declare what is the node set, and then you have to talk the edge set, right? A graph is a node set and edge set, that's all. So let's talk about what will be the nodes. So for every clause that you have in your Boolean formula, for every clause, you create 3 nodes corresponding to each literal in that clause. So for example, here we have 3 literals x1, x1 and x2. So I am going to create 3 nodes x1, x1 and x2. Okay, this is for clause 1. Similarly, for clause 2, I have to create 3 nodes corresponding to each literal. So let me create those nodes here. So this is my node represented the literal x1 bar, this is for x2 bar, and this is for x2 bar. Okay, good. Now, for the third clause, in the same way, you can construct 3 nodes. So this is for x1 bar, this is for x2, and this is for x2. In general, what we are proposing that the number of nodes in the graph will be 3 times the number of clauses in the Boolean formula. So the how many clauses you have, those many into 3 many number of nodes will be in the constructed graph. So node set is done, and every node in the clause is representing a literal in the corresponding clause, right? Now we have to define the edge set. So for edge set, you have to establish some rule, some relationship between these nodes. Now the relationship for construction that we're gonna use is the following. We're gonna draw edge between every node which are from every pair of node which are from 2 different clauses. So the nodes corresponding to 2 different clauses, you're gonna draw an edge between them, provided that they should not be the opposite, they should not be representing opposite literals. So for example, you cannot connect x1 with x1 bar. So this is like within the clause you should not have edges for the nodes, only the edges will be across clauses. So for example, if I have to draw this edge from x1 to x1 bar, I will not have any edge. From x1 to x2 bar, I can have an edge. From x1 to this x2 bar, I can also have an edge. There is no problem in that. Right? From x2 to x2 bar and x2 bar, we cannot have an edge. But x2 to x1 bar, I can have an edge. And from this x1 also, I can have an edge to this x2 and even this x2. Is it clear? So this is all the edges that will be occurring from the first clause. Now, similarly, let's try adding all the edges from the second clause. So x1 bar will have edges. Oh, by the way, I have not added. So again, x1 to x1 bar, no edges. x1 to x2, you will have an edge. And similarly, from here to here, you will have an edge. And from x1 to x2, you will have an edge here. Now it completes all the edges that are possible. Oh no, sorry. You will have an edge from here to here also. Okay, good. Now, let's try to see all the edges from this if it is complete. So x1 bar, it will not have any edge from here to here, but with x2 all edges drawn. From x1 bar to x1 bar, you will have an edge because they are not opposite literals. Right? Then x1 bar to x2 you can have an edge. Then x1 bar to x2 again you can have an edge. x2 bar, already all the edges are done from this set. So x2 bar to x1 bar you can have an edge without any problem. x2 bar to x2 and x2 you cannot have edge, so that's done. Similarly for x2 you can have an edge to x1 bar only, not with x2 and x2. So are we done with everything? Oh, by the way, we missed the edges from x2 to this x2 and x2 to this x2. Okay, now we are done. Any edges are we missing? So what rules we followed? First of all, edges should connect nodes from two different clauses. Second rule, the edge should not be between a literal x and x bar. So such edge should not be there. Is the construction clear? So given a formula phi, can you always construct a graph G like this? Everyone, constructing a graph like this is a graph G, right? This is a graph G I have constructed. I have defined how many vertices will be there, how many edges will be there. How many vertices will be there? 3 times the number of clauses in the Boolean formula. How many edges will be there? Maximum, whatever the number of nodes, square of that. Not a square of that actually. It will be how many? For every node, you may have at most whatever the number of clauses, like if k clauses, so k minus 1 times 3. Those many edges at most. So 3k nodes, every node will have degree 3 times k minus 1. So roughly of the order of 9k square, something like that. Those many edges. By 2. Definitely this is what we are talking about, degree. So divided by 2. That is the maximum bound, which is still a polynomial for k. Am I audible? Okay, so I hope the construction is clear. So what we did, we took the formula phi and we converted it into a graph G. Now we have to define what will be the value of k, and then we have to establish that this holds whatever the condition we are looking forward to. So what will be the value of k? So value of k is exactly the number of clauses, right? So here the k that you're gonna pick with G, it will be the number of clauses in the Boolean formula. So k is whatever the number of clauses given in the 3CNF, that will be the value, and G will be like how you have constructed it. So now we have to prove that. What we have to prove? You have to prove that whenever the formula is satisfiable, you have a clique of size k in the graph G, right? So let's see that. Suppose that the formula is satisfiable. What does it mean? What does it mean by a formula is satisfiable? that at least one literal in each clause is taking value 1. Out of all three literals in a clause, at least one has to take value 1, right? Then only the clause will become satisfiable. So a formula to become satisfiable, each clause has to be satisfiable individually, because there is a and relation within the clauses. So every clause has to become satisfiable. For every clause to become satisfiable, at least one of the literal in the clause has to become satisfiable. And it should take the assignment 1 for it as per the variable assignment. So the literal should take value 1 for whatever the assignment you are doing for the variables. So if a formula is satisfiable, what is certain? That every clause is satisfiable, and so in every clause there is at least one literal that is taking value 1. I don't know. So here, what assignment of x1, x2, x3 will take satisfy? Let's try check with that. So if I take value of x1 equals to 1 and x2 equals to 0, will it satisfy? No. Oh, there is no x3, right? There is only x1, x2. So what value of x1, x2 will satisfy these three clauses? So if I take x2 1 and x1 0, will it satisfy? So x1 0, x2 1. So x1 0, these will not, but x2 take value 1. Here x1 will take value 1. Here x2 will take value 1. Good. So the formula is satisfiable for this assignment. So whenever the formula is satisfiable, at least one literal takes value what? It takes a value which is a literal takes value 1 in each of. So as per the assignment, some literal is taking value out of these three possible, some literal is going to take value 1. As per this assignment, what is going to happen? This particular literal is going to take value 1. For this case, this is which is going to take value 1. And in this clause representing these three nodes, these two nodes will be taking value 1. Out of these all
x1
nodes,
bar, it also take value 1.
sorry?
x1 bar. x1 bar also take a value 1.
Yeah, this will also take value. Now, we are saying the formula is satisfiable and we have to prove that in the given graph, there is a clique of size k. The answer is very trivial. You pick, because in every clause, at least one such node is marked ticked, because one such literal is taking value 1, at least one within the clauses. So every clause has at least one ticked marked node. If there are more than one, you can pick one randomly. And if you pick one from each of these different colored node, means one from each of these clause representing three nodes, you will form a clique. And you can see it. You pick this one, you pick this one, and pick any of these, you will realize you are forming a clique. Because this is connected to this is connected to this, and this is connected to this. Right? So this is a clique. Again, this is connected to this is connected to this is connected to this. Or this is connected to this is connected to this is connected to this. Why is it holding? Why it will always hold true? Don't look at the example. Now think in the theoretical way why it will always hold. So for every clause, what you are making sure? Because in every clause there will exist a node which will take value 1. Correct? Every literal, based on the assignment of that satisfying assignment x1, x2, x3 up to some n variables, each of the clauses you have c1, C2 up to Ck minus 1 and Ck, each of the clauses, because they are satisfiable, some literal will take value 1. I have just picked one such literal. I just have to prove that in the constructed graph, each of them are pairwisely connected. Why so? Because first of all, each of them are from different clauses. So there is a possibility of placing the edge for sure. The only reason there cannot exist further edge is that if there is a literal x and it is connected to another literal x bar. But because you have already fixed the value of x, so x and x bar both cannot take value 1 in their respective whichever clauses. So whenever you have assigned some value 0 or 1 to x, it is certain either x will be taking value 1 or x bar will be taking value 1. So all these nodes that you have picked that were assigned value 1 in their respective clauses, they cannot be of the opposite nature. Right? Either they are the same literals, either they all are x itself, or they are different variables. They cannot be opposing literals. And therefore, because they are from different clauses, they will definitely have a link within themselves. Every pair of such picked literals. And if there is a pairwise edge between all pairs, it forms a clique. What is the size of this clique? Exactly k. So whenever the formula is satisfiable, you have a clique of size k in the constructed graph G. Is it clear? Or is there any doubt in this? Is it clear or not? That whenever the formula is satisfiable, whenever you have a satisfying assignment for the formula, you can always pick one literal from each of the set of nodes for clauses, three nodes in each, right, set for every clause. So you can always pick mark one such node which is taking the corresponding literal is taking assignment 1 as per the assignment for satisfiability, and when you try to see, they will be forming a clique. Okay, let's try to see from the other direction. From the other direction, what you have to prove? You have to prove that whenever you have a clique of size k in the constructed formula, constructed graph, you can always find a satisfying assignment. Right? So now what we are trying to prove, we are saying that suppose when you constructed
Sir, one
this,
thing I want to ask.
yeah, please ask.
Sir, if in different clause, suppose in one clause there is x1, in another clause there is x2. Okay? If x1 value is 1 and x2 value is 0, and there is edge between both, if edge is possible, if this type of edge make a click, then how we will say? How
No,
will
see,
make sure? Okay,
you are
this type
saying
of-
that this is x1 and this is x2, right?
yes,
This is x1, this is x2, and the assignment is x1 equals to 1 and x2 equals to 0.
yeah,
But see, when you, what I am saying that the literal means it is either x2 or x2 bar, right? When you say variable is x2 only. So for both of these literal, there is a single variable x2, but there are two literals possible for every variable. Either it is x2 or x2 bar. When I say the literal is taking variable in the clause, it means that what this literal is taking variable as per the assignment. Is it taking value 1?
literal is taking value 1. Yeah,
How? x2 is taking value 1 or not?
x2 is not taking value 1. x2 is 0.
But then that means this x2 is not responsible for making the clause satisfiable, right?
Yes,
There might be some other literal, because you are certain that the clause is satisfiable. So if x2 is not responsible for that, so there will be some other literal, right?
okay. But sir, when we are verifying without seeing the value of the literal, then we are only seeing the edges between the all the clause, all the nodes.
Yeah,
Okay, then we are not seeing the value. Then actually there is edge if there is value 0 also. If x2 value is 0, then also there is edge between x1 and x2.
correct.
If this edge make a click, then how will say okay,
See, we don't want to worry about if there are hundreds of clicks available or not. For example, there are several k clicks, but my k click is only with this edge, and this edge. That is the one possibility. The other possibility is either you consider this with this one, or you consider this with this one. There are three possible clicks that satisfy my need. But it doesn't mean that there are only these many clicks, because if you take x1 bar, x2 and x1 bar, that is also forming a click. Oh, sorry. Let me give you another example of some click. Oh, in this case, already you are picking three of them, so that is not possible. Oh, yeah, that's what we are coming. Whenever you have a click, you will have a corresponding satisfying assignment. That's what we are going to prove. Right? So that is the second step. We are saying that whenever you are able to get a click of size k, that click will represent actually one satisfying assignment. There can be several satisfying assignment, right? In the previous case, there was only one. But for a given Boolean formula, there can be multiple satisfying assignments that that satisfy the clause. Every satisfying assignment will give you actually at least one k click. And every k click in that graph will be mapped to a given satisfying assignment.
okay, then I think after this it will be clear.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
see, suppose that I think let's just try to see the next step. Suppose that there are these, this is C1, this is C2, and this is CK. And suppose that this particular node, right, this particular node is connected to this node, and this node is connected to this node, and this is connected to this one. And certainly they are further connected to some other nodes here. Now, so what we are saying that this, and some other nodes, they are forming a click, k click. Based on this k click, I can prove that exists an assignment for all the variables x1, x2 up to xn, some value that satisfies the corresponding Boolean formula. What will be the assignment? So the assignment is something very simple. Whatever the node is participating in this k click, you pick all those, make the list of all k nodes. Now every node is representing a literal, right? So it might be x1, it might be x2 bar, it might be x3, something like that. So each of those nodes that are in the k click, you have to make them 1. You have to assign value 1 to those literals. Now, for assigning the value 1, there will be a specific assignment to each of the variables. For example, when you say x1 equals to 1, you want to make this literal true. For that, the assignment for x is 1. But for making x2 complement to be 1, the assignment to x2 will be 0. And likewise, the k nodes that you have, so you will have some k assignment for the literals. So there are k literals, and for each literal, the corresponding variable you will have some assignment. For other variables which are left, if any, you do any assignment, it doesn't matter. still the formula will be satisfiable. Why? Because if you are actually the nodes that you have picked, one node from each of these clauses, so there is a clique. First of all, whenever you have a clique of size k, tell me, can two nodes be from the same clause? No. You cannot have two nodes from the same clause because we did not put any edge for the nodes within the same clause. So if there is clique of size k, so certainly there will be one node from each of the clause. Now the node that is picked from every clause, one node from every clause, make the list and mark that literal and assign the value 1. Assigning the value 1 means the clause becomes satisfiable. Now, the only question that remains to prove that none of these assignments are contradictory, right? Because if you are assigning value 1, assigning value 1, assigning value 1, and rest of the variables which are remaining, whatever the assignment you give, it doesn't matter. The only remaining check that you have to see, because after the assignment of 1 for every node in every clause, by default each of the clauses is satisfiable, and so the formula. But the assignment that we are doing by marking the literal as 1 doesn't actually have any conflicting assignment, that you have two literals here in the list such that you have x1 and x1 bar, and this x1 bar is assigning value 1. So here this x1 says that you assign value 1, this x1 bar demands you assign value 0. So we don't have any such conflicting situation. Will we ever have that? The answer is no, because in the k node clique you can never have x1 and x bar in the list. Why so? Because we made sure that whenever you were drawing an edge, you never had any edge from any x1 type literal to its opposite literal. We never placed an edge. So in the clique you will never have two literals of the opposite nature. And therefore, whenever you will do any assignment, it will not have any conflicting issues. Yeah, someone was asking some question. Please.
No, clear for me.
Not clear?
Clear for me. Clear for
Sorry?
me. It is clear for me.
Okay, so I hope you got that whenever there is a clique of size k, it will ensure that there is some assignment, and that assignment is going to make sure that the formula is satisfiable. And therefore, if we return back to our construction, we said that for a given satisfying 3CNF formula, we are able to construct a graph. Now, if you try to see the length of the encoding of both, to say that how much time does it take, the number of symbols, literals, and the clauses, there will be two things. Each clause contains 3 literals, right? So somewhere 3k literals you have here, and here how many nodes you have? You have exactly 3k nodes. So the conversion from this to this will be polynomial. Very quickly you can convert this phi into this gk. It will not take because the input and output is of the same polynomial size, and conversion will be in polynomial time very easily. So the conversion, the function f is polynomial function, and we have proved that whenever a formula is in 3CNF and it is satisfiable, the corresponding graph and k value, it forms a clique. It belongs to this clique, and whenever the corresponding graph and value k is part of this language clique, the corresponding 3CNF is also in 3SAT, right? Hence proved that 3SAT is polynomial time reducible to clique. Okay, good. So what now? What is next? Once you prove that, then the next thing that becomes the most interesting is that for every problem A that belongs in NP, you can have a polynomial time reduction to SAT problem. This is what is the theorem by Cook and Levin. They proved that SAT is the first problem such that you can reduce every NP problem in polynomial amount of time to SAT. So SAT was this problem, right? Yeah, SAT is the simple satisfiability problem, and Cook and Levin proved that SAT is every NP problem you can reduce in amount of time to SAT. What does it ensure that? It says that SAT is as hard as any problem in NP. So SAT is as hard as any problem in NP. And this is the definition also of any NP hard problem. So a problem is said to be NP hard if you prove that for every A belonging to NP, you have A is polynomial time reducible to that problem B. If you have this kind of relationship, then B is NP hard. So this particular thing ensures that SAT is NP hard. No, it doesn't mean all the problems in NP are equally hard. It just ensures that solving SAT is as hard as any problem in NP. It is one of the hardest problems. Again, I hope you have to go back and see that whenever you are solving a problem, what it says, any instance of A can be converted to an instance of SAT. But it doesn't mean that every instance of SAT is also equivalent to A, right? So it is the same discussion that we were doing when we were talking about mapping reducibility. Because the function is not invertible. It is not onto. It is just going from a mapping from A to SAT. So for every problem in NP, you can find a mapping. That's what this particular theorem ensures. Unfortunately, we don't have much time to cover this particular theorem, but it's a very interesting and amazing theorem, and it gives the foundation to prove for other problems. Because once you proved that SAT is NP hard, right? Once you prove that SAT is NP hard, and SAT, suppose that SAT is also in NP, right? We already said that SAT is NP. We already said that SAT is in NP. You proved that SAT is also NP hard. Then in future, whenever there is a problem X, to prove that problem X is NP hard, what you need to do? If you prove just that SAT is polynomial time reducible to X, what does it mean? It means that X is NP hard. Why? It is from the of the polynomial time reduction, because there is a function f that ensures that some class of functions that ensure that every problem in NP is polynomial time reducible to SAT. And because SAT is polynomial time reducible to X, therefore every problem in NP is polynomial time reducible to X. So X is equally hard problem. So this problem X is again equally hard problem as SAT, and that is in NP hard. So when we say a problem is NP complete, we say that a problem is NP complete when it is in NP and it is in NP hard. Means it has to have a verifier that can verify it in polynomial amount of time, but at the same time it should be one of the hardest problems of NP class. Now one can quickly ask this question that can you give us an example of a NP hard problem which is not NP complete? The answer is something very trivial. There are two versions of these optimization problems. One is called decision one. The other one is optimization. For example, if you take the traveling salesman problem, checking whether there exists a tour of cost K. This is a decision version of the problem. That do we have a traveling salesman tour of cost K? And this decision problem is like a set membership problem. Now the optimization version of the problem is that find the minimum cost tour. The minimum cost tour problem cannot be in NP. Why? The reason is, even if you give that, okay, this is that there is a tour of cost X, no one can validate that it is the optimal one. So optimization problems are usually harder than the decision problems. And this TSP, the decision version is actually NP complete, but the optimization version to find the minimum, that is NP hard. So when it is NP complete, that means it is NP hard anyway, but it is also in NP. So verifying becomes easy. But when it is only NP hard, that means you cannot verify it easily. Is it clear? So there are some more questions given, some additional NP complete problems in the book. First of all, you have to prove that 3-sat is NP complete. Then there is vertex cover. It is a very problem. There are few more problems given in the exercise. You should really try to solve few of them and see. Unfortunately, we will not be able to go to the space complexity part. So that's where we're gonna end our class. If you are interested to discuss the Cook and Levins theorem, I'll be very happy to discuss, because it's a very interesting theorem to study. No, NP hard is not harder than NP complete. NP hard is equally harder to the problems of NP complete. The only thing is NP complete problems can be still verified in polynomial amount of time, but NP hard problems, right? There might exist some NP hard problems. So if you try to see class hierarchy, it will be something like this, that this is actually NP, this is NP hard, and this is NP complete. So NP complete is actually intersection of NP and NP hard. And NP hard problems are actually at least hard as your NP problem.